started. Okay, are you recording it yet? Excellent, okay. So, welcome everyone. I'm Pat Kramer. I'm the program chair for the Crescenta Valley group of the Sierra Club. And we are here tonight for our first in-person presentation of 2025. And the date today is April 16th. And this is going to be a presentation on preparing your summer garden. But before we get into that, I want to just make a couple of announcements. We have Earth Day coming up on April 26th, and we will be participating in an Earth Day celebration at Verdugo Park, which is at 1621 La Cañada Boulevard in Glendale. And at that park, starting at 11 a.m. And going till 3 p.m., there will be all kinds of Earth Day activities, and there'll be booths, and there'll be games for kids, and food, and all kinds of information. So we hope you'll join us on Saturday, April 26th, again at Verdugo Park for Earth Day. Also, next month, on May 7th, we will be doing another program here in the same location, the La Crescenta Library, and that presentation is going to be called Trees, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So if you would like to come back and join us in 3 weeks, we would definitely look forward to seeing you. I do have some ideas for future presentations. We will probably be organizing a bird walk somewhere in the area in the next 2 months, which I'll keep you informed about. And that's going to be given by someone from the Audubon Society, and they'll be helping us identify different local birds that you see around this area. And we also are going to be putting together a presentation on preparing your home for wildfires. So wildfire resistance tips to prepare your home so that it survives the next fire. I hate to say the next, but as we know, we lost a lot of homes in January just recently in our Eaton Canyon fire. One of them belonged to one of our own members, Gail Adams, who's here in the room right now. So those are some of the things coming up. So for tonight, before I get into the announcement, I did want to tell you we do have some hikes planned. Sylvia, would you like to come up and talk about what you have? Because Sylvia is organizing that portion of our programs, shall we say. So have at it.
So we have, hi, I'm Sylvia Derry, and I'm the outings chair and the membership chair for the Crescenta Valley group. And with the hikes, we are collaborating now with the Pasadena group, who is doing a weekly hike in the area where we used to do our monthly hike. It's off Palm Crest Street. It's Palm Crest Elementary, and it goes up to Earl Canyon, all the way up to the platform. It's a very, very nice leg stretcher, and about 5 miles. It's done every Thursday night at 7 p.m. So that is a recurring hike, and we will have a pretty much monthly hike more in the Verdugos. We don't have the next one planned yet. We just did one a week ago over in the Verdugos, overlooking the Burbank airport, and that one is in collaboration with another Sierra Club group and with the Verdugo group. And when I'm mentioning the collaboration, we all work together. So yeah, we are separate groups, but we are part of the bigger Sierra Club, and our activities are in the Angeles chapter website under outings. And I would recommend you go over there and you look, where can you go? Because there's so many places. We may not have something, but all of our other groups do. and it gets you outside, and it, you know, we all work together. So please look at that website. All right?
Thank you,
And
Sylvia.
thank you.
And just like Sylvia was saying, the different groups of the Angeles chapter of the Sierra Club, which is a national group. Angeles chapter is our regional group, and the Crescenta Valley group, which we represent, is our local group. And the other groups that Sylvia mentioned were the Pasadena group, which is part of the Angeles chapter, and the Verdugo Hills group, which basically is Burbank and Glendale area. But we all, you know, we invite you to go on any hike you want or participate in any program you want. So as far as tonight, we're very excited to have a Master Gardener with us, Joleen O'Brien, who is a resident of La Cañada. And she's going to be sharing essential summer garden techniques with us tonight. You'll get to know everything you need to know to get your garden started, focusing on organic materials, what you can grow in the summer season, when to plant, how to prepare your soil, companion planting, pollination, fertilizing, critter and pest control, and watering. So I'm going to let Joleen tell you more about all that. She is originally from the Midwest, grew up on a farm, and she's been tending, harvesting, and preserving her 1-acre garden since childhood. So she knows a lot about that, but she's also been in Southern California for 30 years. So she's very familiar with our climate zone. Joleen, would you like to come up and speak to our group? Thank you.
Thank you, Pat, and I appreciate that. Let's see. Tell me if you can't hear me. I will talk as loud as I can, but not yell. So I really appreciate that you brought me here. Help me keep track of time. I could talk 2 hours about the garden. So there's just a lot of fun things I'm going to cover tonight. So I've got a chance to talk to a few of you. Tell me really quick, how many of you currently have a garden or have grown vegetables in the past? So we have experienced gardeners here. Excellent. So I am going to cover over all the basics, as Pat said.
I'm going to have you get closer to the mic so it picks up on the
All
recording.
right.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you. So, well, I appreciate the introduction. I can say a little bit about more about myself. I do live in La Cañada. I've been here for the last 13 years, so very familiar with the climate zones that we live and what we can grow here in the foothills. I can tell you then more about the Master Gardener program. So I'm a Master Gardener with LA County. Master Gardeners are a nationwide program, and they're managed state by state and county by county. So many years ago, I got certified within LA County, and it's a complete volunteer program. We have a number of hours that we meet, a very, very active base. Our primary goal as Master Gardeners is education and training. So most of what we do are workshops, you know, presentations like this. We have a booth at the LA County Fair here and there in May. Go over to the farm area. I've done presentations there before too. We have a little stage I have ongoing, all kinds of topics. And Master Gardeners, we don't know everything, right? We're really there to work with the community. I learn an awful lot when I talk with folks at events like this and my fellow Master Gardeners. And all kinds of different specialties. I like talking about vegetable gardens, also native plants, but there's people who work in, we have an orchard trimming core committee group, and they go out and help teach people how to trim their fruit trees. So you can find those different kinds of workshops, composting, all sorts of things. So we offer annual classes. They're called Grow LA. There is a QR code on the stand back there. If you wanted to get information about the events and the classes that we offer, sign up for that newsletter. The Grow LA classes are twice a year here in LA. They're all over the county. Usually, I think they've already started, so the ones that are in March and April are going to complete the next couple weeks, and then there's some in the fall. So everything that I'm talking about today, you would get a much more in-depth experience in those 4-week classes, 4 times, not 4 weeks. And so I encourage you, everyone I've ever heard take those classes, and they're all run by Master Gardeners too. All right, so great introduction, thanks Pat. Everything that I plan to talk about today is going to be related to your summer garden. So that's warm season vegetables, the schedule of when to plant for your vegetables, soil preparation, a little bit about mulching and fertilizing, pollination, which is so important. pests and diseases, which are a constant, and watering. Okay, and most of what I'm going to say and talk about here relates to, because I know you're looking to do some container gardening, I'll talk to you. You can do this in raised beds, container gardens, or just a bed in the ground in your soil. A lot of what I'm talking about applies to all of that. So one of my favorite quotes, and if you guys have all gardened before, is every great garden has been in the wheelbarrow 3 times, at least 3 times. Because when you garden, there's successes, there's failures, and it's all part of the learning process, and I find that the most rewarding because there's always something new to learn, and even experienced gardeners kill a lot of things. So don't worry, anything, you're in good company. The list of warm season vegetables is really long. It's really wonderful. In Southern California, we have a really long growing season. All of these vegetables that are listed here love long, warm days, lots of light, long seasons. You want at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight to grow most of these. And what I think is really great about all of these vegetables is there's a lot of varieties within them. So you can grow 6 different kinds of tomatoes if you have the space for it. Lots of different kinds of peppers. Zucchinis, and so it's not just limited to this list, and if you want a very extensive list, I have more in the handouts that are back there on the table. There's a lot of different varieties, and I just like to go to the local nurseries and walk around and like pick up things and put them in the I have a call out down here to edible flowers. Not a lot of people think about edible flowers, but not only do they make your garden look really good and they attract bees, but they're fun to eat and they all have different flavors. So nasturtiums and pansies. And I think it's a great conversation starter. I'll take a salad to a potluck and I'll put flowers all over the top of it and everyone's a little freaked out. Can you eat that or is it just a garnish? And it's like, yeah, you gotta eat it. So it's just a really great fun way to talk about gardens. And of course, warm season herbs. There's a very long list. This is what I have on this slide is short. Plant all sorts of things. But what I really want to do a call out about is what I would call season adjacent plants that you can plant kind of in the middle zone between spring and summer before it gets really hot. What we benefit here is April, May gray, June gloom. It's not that hot yet. You get to July, it's gonna come on. But there's varieties that are heat tolerant and bolt resistant. And bolt resistant means it won't go to seed quite as fast. You're gonna be able to have that plant a little longer. So like that photo on the lower right here, that's lettuce. Later in the season, I've got it under a row cover so that it's protecting it from the sun. It gives it a little bit more shade and it isn't quite as hot underneath there. So lettuce, bok choy. I've grown Swiss chard all summer long if you put it in the shade of a tomato plant. Cilantro and dill also in some shady sides. So there's an awful lot that you can plant during the summer. What's really important to know is your microclimate and the zone that you're in. So most of us are going to be in zones 20 and 21, and these are defined by the Sunset Climate Zones, and you can look that up online. They have lots of maps. What defines those zones are our highest temperatures and our lowest temperatures throughout the year, defining that, and also where other weather comes from. For us in the foothills, we get not only inland, and obviously we get tons of Santa Anas and winds and things that come down from the mountains, but we also get weather that comes in from the oceans. We have the fog and on the winds, and it's pretty wonderful because we can grow so much in our areas because we have that warmer winds and the ability to grow more than, say, if you were at a higher elevation or in drier areas or near the ocean that is much cooler. We get a lot of good temperature here. So I always say, watch the weather. Oh my goodness. So this photo on the right here in my slide, do not be fooled by going to the nursery in February. They start putting out tomato plants and peppers and you get a warm spell and you're like, woohoo, I'm gonna get a good early start on my vegetable garden, and I put it in the ground. And then March comes along and all of the temperatures drop into the 30s and 40s and we get a hailstorm. So you just don't plant warm season vegetables in February or March, because I've got 2 very, very sad tomato plants in here. And underneath those jugs that I was attempting to protect are very dead basil and pepper plants because they were seriously unhappy. So you really just need to wait until the weather is more consistently warm.
Yeah.
So you can plant over a range of dates. If you think back of what the weather we've had over the last couple of weeks, we had a really good warm spell last week, but prior to that, up into the end of March, we were still having lows into the 40s. Not a good time to plant your warm season vegetables. You just need to wait. It's hard to wait. I really want to get things in the ground, but if you do that, they're not going to grow any faster anyways. So wait till April. And so the last couple of weeks, we did have a warm spell, almost too warm, and now it's cool again this week. But there's early April. You can plant the big long list of vegetables in early April. By end of April and May, we're going to start having more consistent warm weather, more air. The temperature is going to be a little bit warmer. And as soon as you start getting to early May, it's even better because these warm season vegetables want warm soil. If you put them in the ground and it's cold, they're just not going to do anything. Tomatoes, for example. So tomatoes really like warm temps. You want daytime temperatures at least 70 to 80 degrees. Nighttime temperatures, not anything below 60. That's for a tomato. If it gets outside of that range, it gets too cold or too hot, all the blossoms fall off and you're not going to have any tomatoes anyways. So that's why planting them early doesn't really do you any good. You want to wait a little bit closer to May. But if you don't get your plants in the ground by June and you're thinking, can I still plant in July or August and September? You can, but it's really going to be hot and it's going to be hard to keep those plants alive. It doesn't mean that you can't. Like those row covers that I'm going to talk about row covers a lot because I use them a lot to regulate temperature and moisture underneath that row cover. So if you wanted to, say, seed plant something in July and August, you've got to keep the ground moist, and the way to do that is to keep it covered and keep it watered. It's really hard to do when it's 95 degrees and 105 degrees outside. So if you're going to plant vegetables, I recommend trying to get them in the ground before you hit July. The other way to plant is called succession planting, and the method of that is a continuous rounds of seed planting. So if you have enough space, and you don't even have to have a huge amount of space, but every 1 or 2 weeks plant, it works really good for radishes and lettuce and beets, carrots that are seed starts and have like a short growing spell. So you plant a little bit of radishes, wait a week or 2, plant another one, and they're going to start growing at different rates, so you have this continuous harvest of the same plant. So that's a succession planting. All right. So your soil is literally the most important thing that will help you to guarantee garden success, because the soil, the health of that, the nutrients, is what's going to, your root growth is counting on that good soil. So that's the first place to start. And this slide might be the most important out of the whole presentation. So at the beginning of your season, you might be in a hurry, might run out of time, but you need to get some compost in the ground. And some people will say, well, I've got light sandy soil or I have heavy soil. What do I do? Add compost. It's all the same result. I mean, the challenge with sandy soil is the water doesn't stay there. It all drains through really quick. And if you have really heavy, dense soil, the water is going to pool and it'll rot your plants because the roots are sitting in water. So the solution to that, when you add compost, it helps balance out that drainage, puts nutrients into the soil for your plants. It loosens up the soil, creates more oxygen. Your plants are just going to be really happy. So when you mix that in, put about 2 to 4 inches of compost and or composted manure. It depends what you feel that you need added to your soil. Mix it in really good, water it deep, and let it rest. And the reason for letting it rest is so that compost, the organisms that are in the soil are going to get a little bit of a chance to break down that compost, and then it makes it more available to the plants. But sometimes I'm just really way too busy to wait 2 weeks. I just don't have that kind of time, busy life. Sometimes I only have the weekend in my garden. So if you mix in the compost and you don't have time to wait 1 or 2 weeks, I would just say deep water it really good, get it really wet, and then let that soak in and then plant the following day. Your plants are still going to be fine. It's just you don't want to start gardening in it right away, and definitely you want it to get wet. All right. That's another reason too, is you don't want to turn the soil when it's super wet, like right after a rain. You don't want to walk on it. You don't want to be turning the soil. You just need to make sure that it drains. So it's moist but not super soggy. And the goal of all of this too, as you're turning the soil, is to create a uniform texture. So you're going to want to remove any of the rocks and the twigs, any roots. I have container raised beds, and the roots grow up into it through the season. So when I'm turning it, I chop all those roots back out. Even for the trees that are 20 feet away, there's roots still coming in. They like the nutrients in the bed, so they're heading for that. But anyways, you'll create a really good raked surface, and that helps for them when you're planting and for watering your seed growth. If you have raised beds or containers, or you're getting ready to start, I highly recommend you use all planter mix or or a proportion of it. It can be expensive to buy that. So the reason I'm saying that is only from personal experience. Many years ago when I put in some more raised beds, I was a little tight on budget, and I thought, okay, I'm going to use some of my native soil. It's just the soil here in the foothills. It's rock hard. You have to use a pickaxe usually to dig in it. And I thought, well, and I threw a bunch of leaves and compost, and I mixed it with a bunch of horse manure, composted horse manure, and everything grew really fabulous that first year, just fantastic. The following year, not paying attention, put a little bit of compost on top, and the soil below, turns out that that whole year of growing, the plants had completely absorbed all the organic matter, and I had native soil compacted in the bottom, and nothing would grow in it. So I complete the worst garden of my life that summer. So I realized, I was like, well, okay, it's fine to put in the native soil, but I had too much. And when you buy the planter mix from your nursery sources, they already have a lot of nutrients in it. It's super balanced. So you have to kind of decide what's your best method. And if you're growing in the ground without raised beds, that's totally fine too. Just make sure you're just mixing in a lot of compost at the beginning of every season. If you're uncertain about your soil, for just basic testing on pH and nutrients levels, you can buy a soil test kits from garden stores. But what's beyond the scope of what I'm talking about today is if you've had any damage from fires or ash that have fallen on your, that really is not what I'm talking about today, and you would have to get a professional lab test to test for those contaminants and toxins. So your local garden store tests aren't going to be good for that. Okay. So when it comes to start planting, as mentioned before, you want to make sure wherever you're planting these summer vegetables that they get 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. That's going to ensure their most success. More sunlight, they're going to get bigger and grow faster. A little bit less, they might struggle a little. Now that you can, of course, grow shady plants in less hours than that. And to maximize your space, if you don't have a lot of room or you're just really trying to maximize and get a lot of production out of the beds that you have, there's a lot of little tricks that you can do. The photo in the middle there's a vertical trellis, and that's just, you can buy panels of that mesh. I think that's actually rebar panels, that goes into cement beds, or you can buy what's called cattle panels, and mount them into poles and drive it into the ground. And then the variety of plants that you put there should all be climbing plants, pole beans, not bush beans, but pole beans, anything vertical that you can get up out of the ground, squash, all kinds of melons. Another option or an idea is off to the left. That brown trellis, wooden thing that you see there in that photo, that's a vertical trellis. I cut the legs off of it, and you tip it sideways and add legs to all 4 sides so it looks like a little table. And then you can grow your cucumbers over the top of it, and you can grow underneath it in the shade, your shade-loving plants. And so you're maximizing, because the cucumber only needs this amount of dirt. It doesn't need to lay all over the dirt. You get it up off the dirt and you can grow something underneath it. So that's another way you can get a lot of production out of that. So that's growing vertically, growing horizontally. Also, you can plant what I would consider high-producing varieties. And some varieties in seed packets and plants will say, produces a lot, high-producing. But I also would say it's how you use your space. So if you've ever seen a broccoli plant before, broccoli plants are big. And they produce 1 head, and that's the only thing you eat. Sometimes you get a variety and they have side shoots, but you've just occupied this much of your entire garden to grow 1 meal. So I tend not to grow broccoli unless I have extra space, just because I don't have the room for it, and if I'm going to put something in the ground, I want it to really produce whatever I'm putting in the ground. So it's just one example. If I have the room, I'll put in head lettuce, but usually I plant leaf lettuce because leaf lettuce is a scatter and you can harvest it over and over again. Head lettuce, you have to wait till it's done and you cut it off, and then there's nothing else growing there because you cut the whole head off. So it's just different ways of thinking about how you're using this space to maximize it. Tomatoes, in this bed here, I generally, not 100%, will plant what are called indeterminate tomatoes. And those are varieties that never stop growing. They just get big and keep producing like crazy. A lot of the cherry tomatoes are like that. This last year, because it didn't really get cold, I had tomatoes until Thanksgiving, which has never been the case. But they just kept growing and growing and growing. But if you plant indeterminate varieties, they'll get to a certain size and then they produce the majority of the fruit at one time. And the benefit of that is if you're planning to do some canning, or maybe you're gonna make a bunch of salsa, or juice it, that sort of thing. So if you plant, like, say, a Roma tomato, you want them all to produce at the same time so you have enough to do your canning and your preserving at that time. So, and there's heirloom varieties that are both determinate and indeterminate, and it's all preference. You can plant a little bit of each. All right, so another idea, you can, so this vertical trellis here, I have it planted what's on the north side of that bed. But if I had planted it on the south side of this bed, it will cast shadow on the rest of the soil, so then I can plant shady plants on the other side of it. So there's a way to maximize the shady side of your tall plants. In this bed here, this is a 3x6 bed. There's 2 tomatoes. I probably have 8-10 peppers in there that got onions. Over this side I had Swiss chard growing in the shade. There's dill and the cilantro on the side. This is lemon thyme. I've got a bunch of flowers. That's in one 3x6 space. So you think about how much you can get in that and take advantage of the shade that the tomatoes are casting and put the shady stuff underneath the small plants. So you don't have to have a lot of room to grow a lot of vegetables, is what I'm getting at. And then what I was describing, if you do have that head lettuce and you cut it off and you got that empty dirt, then plant as you harvest. Like, don't leave that spot open. Just keep putting stuff in there. Whatever you want to plant, keep going. It just might be a little harder to get it to grow in the heat. I'm just gonna try. Companion planting, the idea of this is that you plant together plants that complement each other in nutrients and diseases and also help deter pests. This is a very short list. I pulled this from the website of farmersalmanac.com. There's books, there's all kinds of guides. It is really a fascinating, you could do a super deep dive in it. But generally, when I'm planting my beds, I'll put the tomatoes and the peppers and the onions all together and basil. In a whole nother bed, it'll be the squash and the marigolds and the radishes or something like that. So there's a lot of details in here, but I encourage you can look it up online on the Farmer's Almanac site. When you're planting, it's really important to keep records year to year. There's a lot of reasons for that. One is just to keep track of what you planted. So like if something grows really well, you can make note, oh wow, it really produced well, I like that variety, you might decide to plant it again. Or it has, a flavor that you really like really well. I mean, I'll try different tomato plants different years, and some of them are just really kind of not my favorite, and I know they're not, if I don't write it down, then I forget what I planted. And also putting the dates on it. You can see like these 2 beds here, this is one of my scribbles. I have this on a clipboard and I walk out into my garden with this, because if I don't write it down while I'm standing out in my garden, I usually forget by the time I get back inside the house. So I'll have the seed packets and the plants with me, and I just scribble it on here really quick, and these are kind of my scratches. But planted most of these beds in early May. There's tomatoes, I've got carrots. I definitely did not like those blue leg beans. I'm never planting those again, they hardly grew. And just things like that, so you remember what you've planted. And keeping track of that. But even more important is to keep track so that you rotate it the next year. So the reason for rotating, you do not want to plant, if you have the space, don't plant the same thing in the same space 2 years in a row. And what that does is to try to discourage the soil-borne pests and diseases that are prone to a certain variety of plant to then not attack it again in the same year. So like you're gonna get certain diseases that attack a pepper or a tomato that are not the same for a squash or a bean, and you rotate those if you can. I mean, that's the perfect scenario, and sometimes that's not an option, but if you have the space, switch it around. Mulching is also very important. There's a long list of benefits there. I think some of the biggest benefit is conserving the soil moisture, so you don't have to water quite as often. It does suppress the weeds and will help improve the soil as it decomposes. So at the beginning of the season, like so you get your tomatoes and your peppers in the ground, you want to put this mulch, about 2-3 inch layers around it, whatever kind of mulch you choose. There's pros and cons to all of these that are listed here. Some of them are expensive to buy, some are less expensive. Let's talk about straw, because I have lots of experience with straw. Not all good. I actually don't use it anymore, but in the early days, I bought a huge bale of straw at one of the horse supply farms locally, and because I have container beds, I don't think it would be so much of a problem if you're planting in the soil. But what it did was create this wonderful environment for all these critters that are growing underneath it, which is what you want. But ironically, it produces mass herds of pill bugs. That's those cute little roly-polies, right? They're voracious when they are out of food to eat. And so they just multiplied like crazy underneath the straw, and when they ran out of things to eat, they started eating all the plants. So I was like, I'm not doing straw anymore, but I never had that problem before when I planted in the ground. I think it really has to do when you're in a raised bed and it's a contained area. I don't know, the pill bugs, they multiply and then they have nowhere to go. That was my theory. Other things about straw too is sometimes they come with seeds and then you're just introducing a whole bunch of weeds into your garden. Wood chips are great, so are leaves. There might be a little bit more coarse. It makes it easier to pull them back if you want to fertilize. You know, you can kind of scrape them back at the end of the year and then put them back on, that sort of thing. Grass clippings are good if you have a lawn and you're mowing grass. The only thing about grass clippings is they can get pretty compressed, so much so that they're almost like a solid layer and you can't water on them. And then when you try to water, all the water runs off. So that's a little tricky thing about grass. Grass really good for paths that you walk on if you want that sort of texture. All right. Let's see. Where am I at? Just make sure I haven't skipped any of the things I want to say. So let's talk about fertilizing. So I've been talking about how you should densely plant and put a whole bunch of plants in a small space. If you're going to do that, you're going to need to fertilize because it's going to eat up all of the nutrients very quickly, especially for heavy feeding vegetables. So when you're buying fertilizer, it's really important to understand what the numbers are on the packages. They're always listed in this order, in these 3 digits. The first number is nitrogen. That encourages lots of leafy green, really deep, rich, and you want high nitrogen if you're growing lettuce. For the middle number, for phosphorus, that encourages roots and especially blooming, which blooming translates into fruit. So you're going to want a high middle number for anything that you're trying to encourage blooms. And then the last number, potassium. Potassium is really good for just overall health and vigor of the plant. It encourages the root growth. It's interesting because I always think of nitrogen and phosphorus first because I'm always either after green or I'm always after the blossoms, but you really need the balance of the potassium. It aids the plant to adapt the sugars that it's needed in growth, and so that's why it's going to help the overall growth. Most fertilizers that advertise themselves for tomatoes and vegetables are going to have a higher middle number because in the middle of the summer, the majority of your food is going to come from the blossoming and the flowers, and that's where your fruit comes from. But in the winter, if you're not going to be growing tomatoes, you're going to be growing, again, lettuce, bok choy, kale, those are all leafy greens. You're going to want a fertilizer with like the one on the lower left that's a little bit higher in nitrogen because that's going to encourage the green growth. And they're all over the place. I mean, there's granular, there's liquid. The granular is really good because it has a slow release, and so you can put quite a bit of it in the ground and then it will reach out and feed the plants over a long period of time. The liquids, I'll put those in if I forgot to fertilize or I'm trying to give a quick boost. Usually those are dissolved in water and then you can pour those into the ground, and that's a quick way to get fertilizer to your plants. I'm a big advocate of organic only for a lot of reasons. They come from natural ingredients. They're all based off of plant, animal, and mineral sources. If you look down here, I took a picture of what the ingredients are and what it's derived from. It's everything you can pronounce and there aren't any chemicals in there. If you would look at this chemical fertilizer, it's derived from nitrates and ammonia. And it also has a really, really high ratio. And this one, it was just one I took a picture in the store. It's even across the board. It says that it's for flowers and vegetables, but it's 10, 10, 10. So what happens, the difference between the organic and the chemicals are many, but one of them is that because there's natural sources for the organic fertilizers, they tend to be lower concentrates because these 3 numbers are the ratio or the percentage of that ingredient within the bag. And so with chemicals, you can get it really higher and you think, oh, this must be better. If you put too much of that on and you don't apply it correctly, it's going to burn your plants and it's going to kill them. And plus, when you're using chemicals, you're actually feeding the plant not the soil. The organic fertilizer is going to feed the soil. And remember, what's most important is the soil. So it's going to introduce the beneficial microbes. It's going to help the roots. The whole ecosystem is going to be healthier by using organic. So that's my pitch. And make sure to look for those two logos. Those are organizations that verify the ingredients to meet organic standards. And so I always look for those. One other tip I have about is a way to get greater yields for your peppers and tomatoes is to use Epsom salts. So you take a tablespoon of Epsom salt and dissolve it in a quart of warm water, get it all dissolved, and pour that around the base of your peppers and your tomato plants. And what that does, it helps to increase the magnesium that's available to the plant, and it transforms it into more blooms. And I will guarantee you, if you do that periodically throughout the season, putting that liquid into the soil, you will have a lot more peppers and tomatoes. And the plants overall are just gonna look a lot healthier. So, and make sure to feed on a monthly basis. You're heavy feeding vegetables at least once a month, or tomatoes, peppers, corn, beets, melons, cucumbers, kind of almost everything in your garden. You just feed everything once a month with the granular fertilizer. Pollination, super, super critical. We actually wouldn't have anything to eat if the flowers didn't get pollinated. And so self-pollinators worry a little bit less about tomatoes and peppers, beans, eggplants. The flowers on those plants are self-pollinating. They have both the male and the female portions of the flower, and so that if the wind or the plant gets vibrated, they self-pollinate themselves. But where we're dependent on insects are for cucumbers and all varieties of squash. They grow two types of flowers. So there'll be a male flower and a female flower. And if you want to know what those look like, there is a handout on the back table there that shows you how to hand pollinate, and there's pictures of both kinds of flowers. So if you are having...
Just a moment, the library is now closed. You cannot go downstairs. You have to exit out of this door. Only this door.
Thank
All right.
you. Appreciate it. Okay, flowers. So, and pollinators. The most important thing to ensure that you have cucumbers and squash is to try to attract bees and pollinators to your garden. So it looks really beautiful too. I always plant flowers in amongst all of my vegetables. There's some flowers that attract bees a little bit better. I've listed a bunch of them there. There's more than this too. And the hummingbirds and the butterflies, they're all wonderful to have come to the garden. And it creates, it's just the whole ecosystem. It's a lot of fun. You can also let your herbs go to bloom. So chives, catnip, thyme, that's a short list. There's a whole lot more that go into bloom, and those attract a lot of bees as well. If some of your vegetables like lettuce or radishes are sort of at the end of their life, let them bolt. That means they're going to flower and they're going to go to seed. And like this picture up here for the bok choy, I had a lot of that I forgot to pick it, and anyways, it went all to bolt, and I just left all the flowers in the garden, and it was covered in bees every morning I went out there. So same with the onions and all of these other varieties. It's just really important to ensure that you get pollination. But again, if you don't, and you find out that you've got these really healthy cucumber and squash plants, but they're not actually producing any, and all the flowers just fall off, there's a good chance it's not getting pollinated. So check out the hand pollinating instructions on that sheet out on the table in the back. So this is probably one of my most frustrating things. If you have a garden, you're going to have other critters that like to eat it. And it is really, truly the most maddening thing to walk out in the afternoon and have an entire bed of lettuce mowed down by a squirrel. And it really gets me aggravated, because when I talk about determining your philosophy, you have to decide what you're okay with losing in your garden to a critter or a pest. My tolerance is a little bit lower maybe than some other people, because I figure if I'm out there really working hard to grow all this, I actually want to eat it myself. I'm not ready to give it up to all the neighborhood animals. So, but it is important, because you can decide how much yield do you want to sacrifice, how many chewed leaves, are you okay with some brown leaves, or what all the cabbage worms and the pill bugs. See, pill bugs. Those pill bugs are on the stem of my cucumber plant. They were starting to chew literally everything. It was crazy. I have peacocks in my neighborhood. I consider them a pest because they eat everything in the garden. So I've had to build a fence to keep them out. All of these on here. I have probably, I would say, the worst problems that I've encountered. Everyone has rats. Everyone has had problems with rats. We were talking about that too. I have ground squirrels, not tree squirrels, but ground squirrels. They're just evil in how much they like to eat. But I do have other people that I've talked to in other parts of LA, they have problems with the tree squirrels. So know your opponent, because then that's going to determine how you try to keep them out of your garden. I'm a big advocate of physical barriers, because that's usually your best insurance. And like I said, there's fences. The challenge with fences is the squirrels and the rats can climb it. So you have to come up with other means to keep them out of the beds. Full enclosures are probably the best way to do that. And that can be a little daunting, like building something like this. But if you want to have a garden, you're almost going to have to do something like this. And when I say with 1/2-inch hardware cloth, that hole is really small, because anything bigger, a rat can get through it. This PVC frame, this is not mine, I found it online, but I thought the frame was really great. I'm like, okay, that's good. You could lift it on and off, you can get in and out of your plants, except this is built with chicken wire, and the rats could go right through that large hole.
Oh, yeah.
So, 1/2-inch hardware cloth all the way. I built this bed in the middle. I was really happy, had tons of lettuce. It was really hard to get off. It was just impossible to lift on and off. So if you're going to do these kind of structures, you have to have the means to be able to get to the vegetables easily. You can create these mesh bags. You buy a roll of the window screening at the hardware store and cut it into pieces, fold it in half, and use a stapler from the house, like an office stapler, and staple it down and make a little pocket, and slip it over the zucchini or the tomato. And the rats and the squirrel can't chew through that metal, and that way you actually end up with ripened fruit. It's a little labor intensive if you have a lot of tomatoes, but it was literally the only way I had produce one year, because I kept using it to all the critters. And lots of other things. I want to talk about fabric row covers, because I use those a lot. They won't keep out a squirrel, and they won't keep out a rat because they chew right through it, but it does keep out the moss and all of the other kind of flying things that are going to lay eggs for the worms. I have back at the table, the local hardware store here, the Ace Hardware, they sell, and well, probably all hardware, 10-foot pieces of PVC pipe, but it's not the kind that you put in the house. It's thinner, it's a 1/2 inch, it's really bendy, and I have a piece of it back there, and you can bend it into these hoops and stick it down in the ground or mount it on posts, and then lay your row cover over it and clip it onto it. And it's actually a very inexpensive, fast way to get a row cover that's going to protect it. And then you can use that when the temperatures are really hot, really cold, you get frost, all of it works for those row covers. So quick ways to throw them on and off. If it's going to rain, I throw the cover off, let the rain in, and then put it back on after the rain's done. Oh, I did mention up here, you can use those clamshell containers you get when you buy stuff in the like produce from the grocery store, if you buy it there. You can clamp those over the fruit. I haven't had as much success because the rats chew the plastic, but I've had people, I've heard that's one way that you can, if you don't want to try to make these mesh bags. When you're doing all of this, my next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the sprays that you can put on it, but you just really want to be cognizant of the beneficial organisms that create the whole ecosystem in your garden, so that whatever you're doing, keep these beneficials in mind, because you don't want to kill these. They're helping you, and they help promote, obviously earthworms, you know about, praying mantises, ladybugs. They all play a role, and the benefits of gardening organically is you are doing your best to preserve all of these beneficials. And I love this photo. So I've never had a hornworm like this in my garden yet, but those little white things on the outside of that hornworm are wasp eggs. And it's feeding on the hornworm. So if you get one of those on one of your tomatoes, just let it go, because that worm's not going to survive very long, and then it just helps perpetuate for that wasp that's helping us. I had a fellow Master Gardener had said that she has a lot of problems with tree squirrels, and she said she puts peanuts out in another part of her yard, and they like the peanuts a whole lot better than her vegetable garden, and so they just go over there to eat and leave her garden alone. And I was like, really? If you could figure that out for ground squirrels, I'm all over it, because that doesn't work. They like tomatoes too much. And of course sunflowers, feeds the squirrels too. I've heard heard of people planting extra tomatoes, and they, instead of killing the hornworms, they'll take the hornworms off of their preferred tomatoes and put them over on the sacrificial tomato plant, and they'll let them all eat that one plant without having to kill the worm, and then you keep your own tomato plants to continue producing. So there's different ways to do that. Let me take a photo real quick. All right. There are a lot of diseases that attack vegetables in your garden. I'm only going to talk about two that I seem to have the most regular problems with in my personal garden, but there are a lot more than this. Black spot will get on your tomato plants, and it is literally what exactly, it looks like little black dots, and then pretty soon it turns a little yellow, and then the whole leaf turns yellow and it all falls off. It will attack your entire plant and defoliate it very quickly if you're not paying attention, and then it weakens the plant so much it won't produce fruit. Powdery mildew looks like sprinkled flour on a leaf, and usually you'll find it most on squash, cucumbers, but if it's really bad, I've had it spread to carrots and kale, and it can get all over the garden. It's a fungus as well. So the first thing that you want to do in trying to stay in front of this is really inspect your garden regularly, because you want to see if it's coming at you before it gets out of control. I have peas in my garden right now. I would in my garden all week long. They're completely covered in mildew, and the plants are all dying. So I'm saying do that, but sometimes it's really hard. But it's as much as you can, try to inspect, and if you start seeing any infestation like this, the first thing you want to do is cut off and collect all of those leaves that have the disease on it and throw them away in your trash bin. Don't mulch them, don't compost them. They've got the disease of that fungus spores in it. And if you keep any of those leaves on your garden, it's just going to keep perpetuating it. So you want to get it thrown away. Another way to kind of discourage those conditions is to water in the morning right at the bottom of the plant, because most of this lives in the soil, and if you splash that soil up onto your plants, it has a chance of perpetuating that, then getting that disease up onto the plant. So if you have a good mulch, when you water, it's less likely to splash up that soil. And if you're watering in the morning, your plants, if you get any water on your plants, then they're not going to stay wet. They'll dry out pretty quick, and that also has a way of discouraging the disease. I already talked about rotating crops and why that's so important. And also make sure that you're washing your tools and your gloves. As you're in the garden, you're getting that, you know, if I'm in there trimming plants and I get around some of the black spot, and I'm going to get that fungus on my tools and my gloves, and then I walk over to my next tomato plant, I'm spreading it for the disease. So do your best. You can use alcohol wipes to wash off your tools. You know, I don't know, buy 7 pairs of gloves, wear one each day, and wash all of them. I mean, whatever you can do, but just make sure you're doing your best to not spread it around with your tools. Okay. So for diseases and insects and bugs, there's a lot of options with organic treatments and sprays. Neem oil is really great, especially for black spot. So once you've trimmed all the leaves off for both black spot and powdery mildew, in that case you're going to spray neem oil all over the plant, because what you're trying to do is proactively get in front of it from spreading. And the same with powdery mildew. Once you get all the leaves cut off, that's when you're spraying the plant. Neither of these kinds of treatments are going to be effective if you leave all the leaves on the plant and try to spray it. It's not going to kill it. You're doing the preventative to keep it from spreading. So you've got to get, and sometimes when you trim, I mean, I've probably in some tomato plants when a really bad infestation taken off almost half the leaves, and you feel like you're killing the plant. But think about it, if you leave it on there, it's going to die anyway. So I'm like, I figure, and a lot of the leaves grow back. So don't feel too bad about the heavy trimming, and then make sure to spray it. Insecticidal soap's really good for bugs and aphids. BT spray and spinosad are good for caterpillars and other leaf-chewing animals, because when you spray those on the leaves, it's a soil bacteria, and when the caterpillar eats that spray that's on the leaves, it gets that bacteria inside of it and it dies. I don't use spinosad as much. I mean, I've had some bad times with leaf miners. Sometimes, so here's where my tolerance is. I let the leaf miners go. I don't spray them because I don't want to spray the spinosad because it's toxic to bees. But if you can do it in a controlled way that you keep it from affecting the bees, then, you know, it's okay to use. You just have to be very very careful and follow the instructions. For powdery mildew, I learned this from a fellow master gardener. If you mix milk, 1 part milk to 2 parts water, and you take that solution after you've trimmed all the leaves off your squash, that wherever you can find the powdery mildew, and then spray that milk solution all over your plant, it works as a deterrent from that powdery mildew to propagate. And some people don't like it because as it's drying, it smells like spoiled milk in your garden, so it's kind of stinky. But I usually weigh it out, and it doesn't smell that much for that long, and it's really good. And it is, if you can stay in front of it, like my example with my peas, it's too late. I can't spray my peas right now and save them because it's too much disease spread. All right, watering. The basics: try to keep the soil evenly moist. Don't let it dry out in extremes, because it really weakens your plant and will make them vulnerable. Tomatoes, if they get extremely dry and then extremely wet, your fruit's going to get what's called blossom end rot, and so you might have a ripened tomato and then all of a sudden the bottom of it turns black. So it's usually either because of inconsistent watering or because it's low in potassium. So you would fertilize and even out your watering. For deep-rooted plants, you want to wait till the top 1 or 2 inches of the soil is dry and then water really deep. We'll talk a little bit about more seedlings. Like this over here in the lower, those are seedlings under a hoops and the row cover, and that big thick line that's going through is the water line, and then those little 1/4 inch, they have sprayers on the end of them. And the benefit of those sprayers is that it's keeping the water evenly moist as I'm trying to grow seeds, and the row cover is keeping it damp, and so those are radishes and carrots, they popped up pretty quick. Other drip systems, this is a soaker hose, which it will then drip water the whole length of the hose. You have to let it run quite a bit longer because it drips out really slow, but that's your even watering. And then this one up here is one of those drip lines where it has a hole like every, say, 12 inches or every 8 inches. They're all good and they all work really well. The sprayers I have a preference for personally because I can seed start with them. You can't seed start with these 2 methods here. You have to go out and hand water for these. And hand watering is great if you have the time, but if you don't have time to stay out there and keep your soil evenly moist on a daily or twice daily, you can opt for something like that where it does it for you and I can just set the timer and not have to worry about it. And that's another view of what it looks like before I put anything in the ground. And right now this is hooked up to an in-ground sprinkler system, but you can hook this up to a hose and put a timer on it, which is what this photo is right here. So there's lots of conversion devices that you can buy at the hardware store that you can attach your hose and all kinds of other soaker hoses and sprinkler systems. You don't have to have it built in order for it to be on a timer. So I have a whole bunch of tips and tricks. So I was talking about the row covers, keeping it consistently moist. It's really good for hot days. Mature plants, make sure to water really deep and slow, because if you imagine tomato plants, their roots can get 12 inches deep. So when you're watering, you can't just kind of scan over it, because all you're going to do is get water in that top edge. You need to stand there, I don't know, count for 10, maybe 30 seconds. And if you're not even sure how much water is coming out of your hose, you can do the same thing. Stand over a bucket, count for 30 seconds, and see how much water fills in the bucket. And you think, oh wow, I only put this much in the bucket, that's not enough to feed my deep-rooted tomato. But if you fill the whole bucket up, well, that's pretty good. That's a couple of gallons, and that means that you've got enough water in 30 seconds on each plant to deep root. That's for hand watering. You definitely want to avoid walking on the garden after watering, and even better if you have paths to walk through around it. So when we're fortunate to get really good rains, don't walk in the garden. And certainly don't walk like where the plant's at. That compacts the soil too much and it'll inhibit from their growing. Hurts the roots. So some other I wanted to talk about hand watering a little bit because everyone says, put in drip systems, do soaker hoses, and they are really good. But it's kind of fun to hand water sometimes. Just to be in the garden, I find it very peaceful. Gives you kind of I plenty of times I'll be standing there with a hose and I'll be looking at the tomato. I'm like, oh my God, there's a hornworm. You know, it gives you a chance to observe your plants and spend time in the garden. It's very peaceful. So that's probably one of the most enjoyable parts of hand watering. It does give you a chance to give extra water, like I just described. Like, how much do you put in a bucket? Well, then you can give more water to this deep-rooted plant and a little bit less water over here. A lot of those sprinkler systems give the same amount of water across the board unless you have individual sprayer heads, like I was talking about. You can control it more in one area and less in area. So hand watering gives you that ability too. If you hook up your hose to a long wand with your sprayer head at the end, you don't have to bend over, and it makes it really easy. You can just stand here and that long wand gets it to the base of the plant, and then that helps with all the, spraying the plant getting water and everything. But I have an exception. So late in the summer, sometime during the summer, at some point your plants are gonna get really dirty. There's a lot of pollen in the air, there's dirt, and your leaves are gonna get coated. And then that starts to promote disease, and especially what's called spider mites. They love dirty leaves. So what I often encourage, do this early in the morning before the sun is hitting your garden, and wash them all off. And I pretend you're a rainstorm and rain all over everything and get it really, really washed off. Get all that dirt off the leaves. Do it in the morning so it dries right away. And that will help prevent some of those issues with the plant growth and the spider mites. Just don't do it a lot. That's the hard part. So I'm trying to figure out when to do it at the right time. I don't know, has anybody ever heard of oyas? Do you know what an oya is?
Mm-hmm.
So these aren't new. They've been around for like 4,000 years. They're used all over the world. It's essentially a clay pot buried in the ground, filled with water, and that porous clay seeps out water. And so if you put these next to deep-rooted plants, even trees and squash bushes and whatnot, when you fill it up full of water and it seeps out the side, those roots are going to cling to the side of that pot and absorb the water out. And it's a way to give them deep, long watering. You can go on vacation, fill up your oya, and leave. You can put these in container plants. They're not even just for the ground. And you can make them yourself. You can buy 2 terracotta pots and you glue them together, and you plug the hole in the bottom of the bottom one. And then I just had a little plug that I dropped in the dot. It's just a little thing to cover the hole because I didn't want anything to fall in there and die. And then you bury it. So you see over there, all you can see is the very top of it. So it's buried this deep. You fill it up full of water, and anything you plant next to it's going to like grow towards that. And then you just periodically fill it up full of water. So it's a pretty cool system. I'm always looking for ways to figure out how to keep my garden alive during a busy life. I work full time. I mean, sometimes I don't make it to the garden until the weekends. Over the summer, you might be traveling. And how do you keep it all alive if you don't have a good friend who will come over and water it for you? There's lots of methods with the oyas, but I would recommend putting it on a timer, even if it's for when you're on vacation. And just hook up that dripper hose or those dripper lines. Keeps the garden alive while you're on vacation and in the middle of a busy week when you can't get out there yourself. Almost done. This is it. All right. So just to recap, the most important thing is a healthy soil. Feed the soil, and your plants are going to be happy across the board. Keep that consistent moisture. On hottest days, you use row covers. If we're going to get temperatures into the high 90s and 100s, you're going to want to protect some of your plants because they're going to get burned. And they're not going to produce anything. They're just all out there trying to survive. All the flowers are going to fall off your tomato plants anyway. So you're just trying to keep them alive until the temperatures drop back down. Make sure to be proactive that you inspect the garden on a regular basis and try to be in front of all those diseases and pests so that it doesn't get out of control. And this one might seem obvious, plant what you will eat. So I have a story about this. So this picture over here is a bunch of peppers. We like hot peppers. I like all kinds of peppers. I plant lots of varieties. And you walk around over here at the La Crescenta nursery and they have so many peppers. And they have the cute ones and the purple ones and all kinds of things. So these are long red ones are serranos. I let them go red. You know, you can pick them when they're green too. That's a habanero, which we'll eat. And there's a bell pepper. But these little yellow ones, I bought the plant because I just thought, oh, it's really cute. I wasn't paying attention. Stuck it in the ground, and it produced like crazy. And I brought them in the kitchen. These are seriously hot peppers. Like, they are completely inedible by my family, and I couldn't even give them away. So I felt really bad because I grew all of these cute little peppers, and I didn't know what to do with them. So it's just, I mean, it was fun to grow up, but it used a space in my garden that ended up, you know, could have been for something else that I would actually eat. And, you know, or grow something for your neighbors or whatever your friends or your family like to eat too. So.
Can you keep the squirrels away with the peppers?
So I have tried that with the
Really?
capsin spray and trying to like figure out, yeah, it didn't work.
Doesn't work, no.
It dissipates too quick. I've tried peppermint oil and I've been through the whole gamut. The rat devices that make noises. Yeah, that's why I recommend barriers, because I personally have literally tried everything. And full confession, I finally installed an electric fence. I couldn't take it anymore. So that's like a whole scope outside of this. But it's just, yeah, it's tough. I wish I could have transferred that into a deterrent. And certainly know your time availability. We were talking about it, you know, I was saying I work full time. You know, the garden's supposed to be, the number one thing is to have fun and find reward in it. If you plant too much and then you don't have the ability to care for it and it dies, or you can't get out there often enough, it feels more like a failure, and that's really frustrating. So I always recommend start really small, experiment small, take into consideration your life. Like again, if you're going to be traveling a lot over the summer, don't plant a lot. If you work full time and you can only make it into the garden on the weekends, keep that in mind. Just don't plant too much, and that way it's a space that's more enjoyable and it has more reward, and you don't feel like you've not given it enough attention. And as I say to my family, and I just did it this last week, and they have a really hard week, you know, there's something that's so immensely rewarding about being able to grow food that you eat, and teaching other people about it. I give food away, and it's something new. That's why the edible flowers is an example. It's physical therapy, it's mental therapy, it's just incredibly rewarding. So my family this last week, I said, I'm going outside for garden therapy. Like, I just need some time in the garden, and it's truly, so I want that for people. That's why I do these presentations. It's just, grow what will give you that reward, but don't overwhelm yourself, and have fun. So that's it. That's all I had to say. And there's a bunch of resources, a bunch of information on the back table. There's lots of community gardens in LA County. There's over 90 in just LA County alone. So if you don't have the ability to grow in your own space, you can find a community garden, and if they don't have open spaces, you can get on wait lists. All Master Gardeners are available if you have lots of questions, and I can't answer it. I would refer it and find somebody else who can help you. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And then we'll ask questions.
Yes, questions?